Hello, I'm Brad.
And I'm Jason.
You are listening to
Dice in Mind.
The year is 36 ABY. Although the First Order has mysteriously fallen, there is growing discord throughout the galaxy. The Resistance struggles to keep hold of the systems until recently overseen by the New Republic. The outer reaches of the galaxy remain as lawless as ever. Meanwhile, for the foreseeable future, even the core worlds and the hyperspace lanes between them are degenerating into chaos. And there are threats, whispered in hushed tones and shrouded in fear of foes unknown and unrepentant. However, for the countless sensitives across the galaxy, more concerning is the sudden, subtle, yet palpable shift in the feeling of what is. For many, like yourself, it was as if at one moment things were as they had been, and at the next moment something was missing from the galaxy. It was almost as if a balance had been eliminated. It was almost as if what was once sharply defiant was now that much more ambiguous. It has been known by many names across the galaxy and over the eons, a felt sense of connection with all that is, a force, a way, a sea, a whispering voice, a promise, and many others. Rumored to have been the purview of priests and even witches, granting untold power and abilities, few today would believe such children's tales. But for the sensitives, there is something, an awareness felt as much as known. And there are sensitives across the expanse of known space and beyond. Maybe it manifests as a gentle tugging at the back of the mind as to what is about to transpire, or as an awareness of those nearby, or even, when one is fortunate or practiced, the ability to subtly act on objects in the world. Whatever it is increasingly common, though little discussed. At the same time, the destruction of the First Order and the attempts of the New Republic to rebuild from its staggering losses have resulted in a power vacuum. Most systems have taken a wait-and-see attitude before renewing their affiliation with any republic, a few choosing instead to form independent fiefdoms in their parts of the galaxy. Meanwhile, amidst questionable tales of a magician who killed the emperor, the cartels have engaged in a power grab, especially the Hutts, who are reaching for far beyond their normal corner of the galaxy. It is a time of hope, it is a time of greed, it is a time of uncertainty. And now with your trusty, if somewhat erratic droid by your side, you find yourself near Hutt space. What adventure awaits you? Life along the edge of Hutt space is never easy. Some days you get the nerf, some days the nerf gets you. But the past months have been tougher than normal. Jobs on the rim have been tight. Coupled with your decision to lay low for a while, you are down to your last credits. And the dreams. No, not those dreams. The dreams had been so real. Even though you'd wake up without any memory of their content, the feel of the dreams lingered, sometimes for about a moment, occasionally for hours. Something was different. But first, a job. It was time to find a job to run. As with many other places around the galaxy, life on the rim for a trader, a smuggler, is entirely dependent upon one's ship. Serving as mode of transportation, method of shipping, means of escape, and even home, the importance of one's ship cannot be overstated. Perhaps that is why so many sentient people who travel the hyperspace lanes of the rim develop a special fondness for their ships. Indeed, there exists a thriving, if somewhat illicit, industry dedicated to servicing and customizing any ship, no matter how mundane or exotic. Now, as you open your eyes and your vision comes into focus, you find yourself in the main hold of the Nighthawk, your little freighter, having been woken from a deep meditative trance by the gentle yet persistent dinging of the job BBS you keep patched into the comm system. Standing from the square mat on the otherwise barren floor of the hold, you walk over to the nearest console and pick up your data pad to scroll through the available jobs that were just posted. Several offers catch your eye. There's what appears to be a quick run between Binet and Korat to shuttle a religious group to some mucky-muck retreat. Another offer to pick up some wares for a regional chain of merchants. and the offer of credits, no questions asked, to transport a small suitcase deep into HUD space. The problem is that none of those jobs pay much more than the cost of fuel for the run. You continue scrolling down the list until something catches your eye. Okay, Brad, roll perception or vigilance.
All right.
All right, let's pause there.
So, what you've all experienced is a little bit of a new, you know what, Jason, I just picked up the dice, so I'll have to roll again later. But so darn. So with a little added radio, old time radio-esque sound effect, we started, in effect, restarted a game that I think I had mentioned on here a while back that I wanted to do a Star Wars game. And one of the things that it's been on me that I haven't been able to do, because we do a lot of recording and just other stuff, it's just I haven't sat down and taken the time. So you have heard here the start of our Droids and Destiny adventure. And one of the things that we learned from our interview, your interview with Rob, is how he has developed this immersive environment and people are engaged and playing on Facebook.
Yeah, he invited us just to follow along on their Facebook chat with their hybrid game. And whoa, I think that's really inspired both of us. So thank you, Rob.
Yes. So what Jason and I have decided is, you know, our friends can join. Brian can join us. His time permits. He's a very busy gentleman. But we have a Facebook group now that we are going to use to start our Droids and Destiny. Copyright 2021, Jason Carmen. Droids and Destiny adventure using the FFG, now Edge Studio.
Now, recent news.
Edge of the Empire, Star Wars Edge of the Empire rule set. So my character is a human smuggler. You heard our game master mention the Nighthawk. So we have literally on this broadcast right now, you heard it first. We have
first roll of the campaign.
The first roll of the campaign.
Yeah.
And we bring this up because with obviously people were doing this before the pandemic. And as we are recording this, as of now, it's the middle of October, the pandemics, we seem to be moving in the right direction medically. But what happened in 2020 is because of being home, because of lockdowns, we've talked about this. There was this resurgence in, let's call it analog gaming.
Yeah, big time.
And you can watch Twitch, you can watch other, Game and Sundry does live gaming. That all predated it. But everyone started realizing, or more and more people realize, that this is fun to do together. And it's a way to congregate. And there's even an article that I think you sent me a while back, probably a year ago now, where actors and
oh no, that was only the Star Trek actors.
Yeah, the Discovery actors. Wasn't Anthony Rapp the game master?
Right.
Yeah. So everybody's playing.
And then oh man, and maybe you remember, I'm bad with names. And then Mary Wiseman's husband, who Noah, who played the Andorian in Discovery. You know who I'm talking about. Sorry guys, it's escaping us. He now is leading a game for all of them because for some D&D thing last month, no, I think it was just a few weeks ago for the D&D celebration, they streamed it with him GMing for a bunch of the Discovery cast.
Oh, see?
Yeah. So
it's gone mainstream, but people can't, there's only so many game stores.
Right.
There's only so many coffee shops. And it's hard to, in effect, a lot of people like to spread their gaming information out. DMs, for those of you that DM and GM, you need some room to work. You've seen, for those of you that have, we have a good group of people who have gamed in stores. We talked to when Jeff was here, he talked about going to game stores, for
Yep.
example. People build out very elaborate environments, Legos or whatever the case is. So it was interesting. We had talked about this gaming. We had started doing it with Pathfinder and then D&D. I didn't really provide a good visual environment for it yet, but we talked about this, and you know, just this idea of using a Facebook group, private group, and then we can roll and play as time permits.
Right, without any obligation or rush. And there's also, though, just to be clear for the listeners, there's also the reality that Brad and I are 300 miles apart.
Yeah.
So you're doing this we had initially planned on doing this via Zoom, and like we've done it a number of times, but not for months. But then Facebook or any platform you'd want, right? Any social media platform you'd want that could allow for a private group chat would allow this to work. So it's new for us.
Yeah. So this idea of, again, Rob is the one that when he talked about it, the light bulb went off for both of us. I think it was after I listened to the interview before it was released. You and I had a conversation where the light bulb had gone on early, but then I literally almost reiterated. I'm like, we have got to do this.
Okay. So you know what? I'm going to challenge that. I don't know if either of us was bright enough to pick it up at that point. When Rob, just a few weeks ago, invited us to join the group to see how they do it, at least for me, that's when it clicked for me. Like when we started, it didn't click for me. Like you were probably ahead of me on that. I didn't appreciate how much they were using Facebook to, I guess, maintain momentum.
I may just have some revisionist history, and I think you might be right. And all I remember is that when it clicked,
we were
both
time,
like,
we were like,
oh yeah,
whoa.
we both talked, and you're like, I'm going to create a group tonight, and you created the group that night.
And then like last week you created an invite. You didn't say anything. It's just I got invited to another fantasy games group, and I'm like, I'm guessing that's for Homeland.
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly it. And I figured I have the group open. We're gonna play Star Wars for a while.
Yep.
And in effect, it's going to be our beta and get better understanding of how to do this in Facebook. And then we'll come back and use that with D&D.
Yep.
Now this is like this was kind of an open topics night, but when Jason and I were chatting back and forth in message about what we wanted to talk about, this idea of multi-platform gaming.
Yes.
You know, we can play on Facebook, and then we can decide, okay, we've reached this point in the campaign. Why don't we do a live session? All of us jump on Zoom, or I jump on Zoom with you, and let's play live. And then we'll update the Facebook group with what occurred, or we take notes in the Facebook group as it occurs.
Yep.
And then we go back, and it allows us to flow the game, even though we can't always play together at the same time. And
what's nice is, like, we're both really good about taking notes when we're playing, whether we're GMing or being the having the PC. But I think what also attracts certainly me, but I think you as well, to the notion of doing it multi-platform like with Facebook is then we also have a log. Right, there's that text log that given that the play will be, you know, irregular and interspersed, any of us at any point can go back and scroll to our heart's content to refresh. And like I plan, like again, really imitating what we've been seeing in that other group. Like when we've been playing and it's been online, not offline. And here I'm just going to define that loosely and incorrectly as online means we're face to face. Offline means we're just doing it asynchronously. So I'll put it that way.
When we're talking face to face, we're talking Zoom. via Zoom, or I think we've used Facebook
or whatever. Right. So I'll say that when we're playing asynchronously, great, it's there. When we're playing synchronously, I will then post a recap. So in Facebook, so that there's an asynchronous recap available for all of us. So if it's like 3 days or if it's 3 weeks, it's all good. We just keep moving the adventure forward.
And in all honesty, we obviously have heard, I've read about it. I remember it when I was younger, people playing by mail. and having multiple games going by mail. It to nowadays, in the day of the internet, I mean, I don't know if anyone younger than us could even fathom this, but rolling and doing things and then sending it in a letter through the post office, and the game would crawl, but it would be something for people to do and look forward to.
Right.
Now, with the advent of, when the internet came around in the 90s, then it went to play by email,
right,
where they would go back and forth because instantaneous communication still wasn't quite there yet.
And I think we tried that at some point, and it just wasn't going to work because you have to be so consistent for it.
Yeah, and you have to, in effect, this was the days before chat. I remember one of the first chat clients out there I used was ICQ.
We spent a lot of time as a group on ICQ.
Yes, and before ICQ and some of these, before I really got into Kali, which was a gaming platform for video games, playing by email meant that we really all needed to be kind of online. But even though we were online, it was linear, back, forth, back, forth.
Exactly.
Even Facebook allows us, because of the instantaneous nature of communication via Messenger, Facebook, or whatnot, it makes synchronous and asynchronous play allowable within one single adventure or campaign.
I mean, to use a current term / an older term, which to me are quite comparable to one another, and I know that's cheating a bit. I think of using a platform like Facebook, which curates so well. Actually, you and I are on Facebook all the time. Let's just be honest. As my daughters have said, that's for old people. But I don't know that this would work as well on another platform like Twitter, although maybe it would. And I mean, I think that's great, whatever works for you. But I look at the start of Droids and Destiny as a multi-platform adventure, as essentially we're building a wiki for the game. Right. Or if we want to call it old school, we're building a BBS where it's right. You notice in the intro, you're on your job BBS. That was a throwback for us because the concept of the BBS, sorry, for those of you, well, we don't really think there is anyone younger listening, but if you weren't a geek when you were little, and if you're listening, we know you were, a bulletin board system, an electronic BBS, the concept is that's what things like Facebook and wikis have matured from. And so it, like you said, it doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be synchronous, but it can be linear and it can be synchronous and it's searchable and on and on and on. So yeah, I think we're both kind of stoked about this opportunity.
I think, just as an aside, what's funny is I'm completely off topic, but you'll appreciate this. I was cleaning out some of my old Mac equipment.
Yeah.
And I've kept my original Mac Classic is sitting next.
Yeah, you sent me a photo.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing.
One of the things I got rid of was my Global Village titanium 56K modem.
Oh man.
And it was made by a company called Global Village. It was, in effect, almost like the de facto modem you bought when you had Macs back in the dial-up days. And I was upstairs, I was mentioning that to Angela because we were telling the story about having to run phone cord to dial up. And with Angela, she had to run one almost across the house to connect the computer. So we bought 50 feet.
My first modem in college was 2400 baud.
Yeah.
And now you and I both have fiber optic going into our homes.
Yeah. And so, I was trying to explain to Trent what 56K was.
Yeah, good luck.
Because he was complaining about internet speed. With 1,000 gigabyte.
You just
download.
Upgraded. You guys have, you're like us. You've got like 200 to 400 to 500 megabits everywhere.
Yeah. But you still have children complaining about bandwidth. And then I said, well, you should have seen what we did with 56K.
Back in my day, we downloaded overnight.
It literally was this type of discussion.
That's great.
That being aside, I just figured you'd get a kick out of hearing the term Global Village.
Oh, I haven't thought about that since college. Oh my God.
So, there's platforms out there. Roll20 is one that's very popular with folks. I'm not familiar with all the names. I actually joined a Kickstarter. I told you about this a while back, called the Neverending Dungeon.
Yeah.
So it's going to be AI. they call it AI powered software for adventures, and you can use it for fantasy, you can use it for space. And I was trying to look up because there was another one. Arkenforge is another product.
Yeah,
that
you sent me that one too.
Yeah, I've started to play with. But what I have found to be interesting about this, and this is the visual cue component to it. We've been playing for the better part over a year on and off when we have time and when we aren't
way
recording.
more off.
Yeah, way more off.
Way more off.
Yeah, we've got a finite amount of time for all of this, and we've spent a lot of it.
It's been the podcast.
It's been the podcast, just because we get such a thrill out of doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I always felt I lacked the ability to produce was a good visual environment, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It just, visual. And I didn't realize this idea behind designing your token. In effect, it looks like a virtual coin.
Yeah. Right.
So as a joke, I created the first tokens. I think I put Alan Rickman in your token because your fantasy character is your fantasy character voice
fashioned after him.
Alan, yeah. So Professor Snape ended up being in one of my test tokens.
Yeah.
So this idea of customization of your character, even beyond your character name, down to your token that you use on whatever board you need. This idea of Neverending Dungeon or Arkenforge, two of them almost like take Roll20, and I'm not knocking Roll20. It almost takes it ups the ante.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really miss with online gaming that I haven't been able to do, and I think we could even do better in Facebook because you can do still shots, is this idea of fog of war. When you're moving in a dungeon, you only should see a certain area around you. X feet.
Yeah, and when we've played, we've both tried. I especially tried that when I was GMing that one shot. Was that was D&D?
Oh, that was the one shot. Was you doing Star Wars?
Oh, Star Wars. I'm sorry, I was using Star Wars, but and it's really hard, like with PDFs and it's the fog of war is a tough one.
So this idea, what really came up in our organic discussion earlier was, yes, more and more people started playing online together virtually in 2020 going into 2021.
Yep.
You have people that broadcast their games on Twitch. That's where you have Critical Role, and you have them on podcasts like Glass Cannon. You've talked about this. You listen to it. That's how you learned a lot of some of this gaming stuff. Listening to podcasts. And let's be honest, your idea, you're listening to the podcasts is, you can tell me if I'm wrong, is some of the reason why you came up and said, hey, maybe we should do a podcast. We don't have to game, but let's find a different niche.
You are 100% right. I mean, this, you and I had talked about just how much we enjoyed podcasts in general. We typically listen to very different things, right? Because that's so specific, and it changes over time. But how enamored we both were with the concept. And I had this itch for quite some time to host a podcast. I was just for sheer fun. And then you had said something during a chat one night of I wonder if we could make it profitable. Well, so far we know the answer to that, but that's not why we're doing it. And then finally, I think something flipped, and I think I said to you, I think I'm going to do this, period. What do you think? And then you and I we talked about this early in our first episodes, maybe, but I think you and I spent a solid 6 months a solid 6 months doing groundwork, setting things up, getting accounts ready. We weren't in any rush. In fact, because it predated last winter break, last winter holidays. By the time the holiday season came around, in fact, I remember coming downstairs to the office at home over my winter break and like getting like putzing with Patreon and buy me a coffee. Like we were kind of doing like step by step down a checklist.
And we were not in a rush. We
Nope.
went out and researched the mics that we use for this are the same ones.
Yep.
We wanted to do it right. You know, it was more humor intended about profitability, but this idea of someday hopefully having it self-sustaining.
Yep. Right.
In terms of the costs, which are not all that much.
Nope.
You know,
Nope.
we used a service where someone overseas designed our logo.
Yep.
You know, so this idea of doing this podcast really stemmed from me looking out from you and I talking. You listen to them a lot more than I did. Glass Cannon, and I'm on the Shoulders of Dwarves, I think is one that you listened to.
And that they went on hiatus a year or so ago, and they're on a second. But that was really, I have to say, I'm glad you said that. I will put that in the show notes. That's a shout out, because on the Shoulders of Dwarves that's what I kind of thought. That's probably what we need to look at in terms of a guide, because we don't want to do, like, we're not going to turn this into a live action, a live play. I mean, no thanks. That's not either of our things. But on the Shoulders of Dwarves, what is it? Sorry, I'm blocking on one of their names, so I won't try to flub them. But those two guys, it was just like a tutorial, and sometimes it was nuts and bolts, and sometimes it was conceptual about in fact I started listening. I remember listening on the way home from one of my visits to Wisconsin to see you guys, one of our Eau Claire trips, and they had just started.
So this idea, you know, I can't remember what we're doing this online organically, but this whole idea.
You have to prep people to achieve this level of mediocrity.
Yeah, exactly. And it took us a long time to achieve mediocrity.
Still on the way.
We'll hopefully get there.
We aspire to plateaus of mediocrity. That's right.
Yes. But this idea of mixing synchronous and asynchronous play. It didn't. I'm almost like it almost is like one of those things where you kind of just knock yourself in the head for fun. Why didn't we think of this sooner? And again, okay, that's where I know we were going. Podcasts, watching this stuff. There's so much around gaming, but you know, we don't necessarily have the same amount of time, nor can we provide the production value, even internally. And there's obviously absolutely no one that would want to watch us play.
No, we have faces for radio.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Which reminds me, I was going to tell you that my son showed me how we could actually live broadcast and have both of our faces enter whatever it is on each side of the screen. So if we really ever want to get rid of what remaining listenership we have, we could actually
dignity.
We could actually go video.
I really truly want you to show me how to do that. I think I know how to do it. I've never done it. I think I know how to do it on my own on Zoom, but I'd love to see that. But we are never ever doing that for Dice in Mind.
No, definitely not. And it's a little more equipment than I thought to involve it, because Trent, my son, watches a lot of that because he uses it as strategy sessions for himself when he plays games like Rust, or he's now getting into Forza, which is car racing on the Xbox and so on. So this idea of when you watch these superimposing, but you'll see this with these games where you have it's literally like a Zoom meeting where everybody's in there, everyone creates frames or has you know, it's very elaborate. Cool. And we just don't have that, you know, production value because we're just more kind of ad hoc, let's play. And that was before we got into the podcast.
We don't have the time either. I mean, that's one of the reasons we do this, that as fathers, as husbands, as active professionals, it's honestly astonishing that you and I have been able to sneak away a few hours one night weekly for as long as we have, without catching more flack than we do. And
I'll reverse that and say, I'll get asked periodically during the week, are you recording tonight? Are you recording tonight? I think the idea of me leaving the area
Oh, might be appreciated.
It's more than appreciated. So,
Well,
so
there
even,
you have it.
and even tonight when I said they were going to record, and we're recording a little later because I made a mistake on time. But when I told my wife earlier in the day, I'm like, oh, we're recording, and her face lit up like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning.
Finally, I just get an hour and a half to 2 hours of quiet from that man.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
So, but the point is that, you know, we always take time to talk. The group of all of us talk multiple times per week. I call it a family. We're friends that are family. And so the organic nature of this lended itself to a podcast. 1, 2, it lended itself to gaming.
Yep. And
this idea of us being able to continue the game when we can't be online together.
Yeah.
Was I hate to say, for me personally, it was paradigm shifting, and
I know, isn't it dumb?
Yeah, it's
true.
Over dramatic, but you know, you just heard what Jason had written, the introduction Jason had written, and then the first pieces where I had to roll have been on Facebook. I just haven't gotten back to them, but it's a group that thus far Jason, Brian, and I are in, and Brian will play, like I said, when he can. But once we get going and get all the kinks in the iron out with this, then we'll be able to simultaneously run the D&D campaign and the Star Wars campaign simultaneously. And then decide when we get online what we're going to play.
That's right. Okay, let's pause for a moment.
Yeah,
take your dice out.
I'm gonna have
because I think you cleared them by accident when you were right.
I did.
So go ahead.
Now, just for those that are we're playing Star Wars, which is the narrative dice system. So
the Genesis system, which is now officially the Edge Studio Genesis system. Their website, as of this recording, is now up and live and beautiful. Scott, big shout out and thank you for sharing this with us, both personally and to the Dice and Mind site on Facebook. Good friend sharing good news. Okay, so
I'm gonna roll again. You might not hear the dramatic roll effect.
It's okay.
Like you heard at the beginning of the. So I'm rolling in effect what are called 2 purple dice, which are
difficulty dice. Yep.
Okay.
I'm gonna call it that. And I gave you the option of rolling perception or vigilance, because so you're gonna roll your green dice, or maybe green and yellow if you got a proficiency die in there. What are you going to roll? Perception or vigilance?
Let's roll perception.
Okay, so your character is scrolling through his data pad, right? Trying to find a better job with better pay. And I gave you the option of perception or vigilance because perception, it just makes sense, right? You roll perception all the time, but also vigilance because, scrolling through a data pad can be really tedious. And I don't know, I haven't seen your character sheet yet. So I don't know where his strengths are. So this way it gives you some prerogative as a player. So what did you get in total? Oh.
So while you were talking, I'll be perfectly honest with you. We had a
glitch.
I had a little glitch and I froze. So let's go back. I'm going to roll perception.
Yeah. And while you were glitching, I was just explaining my logic of why perception or vigilance.
Okay. So
you roll perception.
So, hold on. D20, you roll your dice, you see what the answer is. Narrative's a little different. So there are purple, green, blue, black, red die for things. When I'm rolling perception, I actually have that as a what do they call them? Pips. I have one pip under perception.
So what's your total? What's your total dice makeup for that? How many greens plus the yellow?
So am I doing for each pip?
So let's just walk, because if you're familiar with the Genesis dice system, indulge us, guys. If you're not, this is for you briefly. So Brad, perception falls under which abilities up on top?
Cunning.
How many dice do you have in cunning? What's your score there?
I have 2 in cunning.
Okay.
And then I have 1 pip
So you start with 2 greens, and then you flip 1 green into a yellow proficiency die. So you're rolling a green and a yellow, correct?
Correct.
Beautiful. And then I asked you, I said to roll 2 difficulty, which is average difficulty. And because the narrative dice and the Genesis dice are basically 1 to 5, 1 being easy, 5 being daunting. And then like 5 being daunting is like, I want you to swing a back golf ball and put it into my left ear while I'm turned away from you at 400 yards.
Or roll or run a marathon.
But look what I just did there. I took the puck and I ran with it. I did a sports metaphor for you.
Yeah, I totally missed it. Go sports.
Yes, go sports. Okay, so you
difficulty. Those are which color die?
Those are the purples.
Purples.
And those can be upgraded to the nasty red dice. I'll be honest. I've almost never done that or found need to. Sometimes in the books they'll tell you to upgrade the difficulty from the purple to the red. And if you listeners, if all these dice have names, but quite honestly, what I have heard, what I have read, and what I've experienced myself GMing, just calling the dice by their colors is much easier to learn. So green and yellow, good. Purple and red, bad. There are also boost and setback dice. Boost, kind of good. Setback, kind of bad. So blue and black. Okay, so you rolled a dice pool of a green and a yellow and 2 purples.
Yep.
And what was the outcome?
So I don't know what to name these. I'm playing stupid here. So I rolled a yellow of 2.
So you got 2 advantages on the yellow.
I rolled like this. People can't
That's holding
see
them up to the so total is you have 1 success and 2 advantages on the good dice. What did you roll on the bad dice? The 2 purples. As he throws them across the room.
Yeah. I got nothing. So I got
a failure and a threat.
Yep. And then another
threat. Okay. Yeah, threat. So you rolled 1 success and 2 advantages against 1 failure and 2 threats. They completely wash out.
Yep.
So as your character scrolls through the data pad, he's just not seeing anything that stands out. And out of frustration, puts the data pad down on the console, walks out of the hold of the Nighthawk, and heads toward the cockpit. All right, I'll pause that. And so this is how it's going to work probably on Facebook as we do multi-platform, that we're just going to do a roll at a time. And then as the player, you can elaborate. And as the GM, my job will be to move us forward. So like I'm going to hold up to the screen so Brad can see, but not so closely that he can read it, because you've seen these before.
Yep.
I have a system that I worked out. So this is the logic chart for episode 1. Yep. And so these are the basic tasks with an eye toward keeping it really simple so that it can work on multi-platform.
And to be honest with you, this idea of I think for some, this idea of narrative dice, like we had talked about, is new. It's not just I have my in effect air quote D&D dice sitting over here, my black with gold trim on it.
Yeah.
And you roll, D20 is obviously the grand poobah of dice.
Yeah.
So this was and it's still a learning curve for me, but another reason why we're doing this is because we want this to parlay itself into when we continue our trek port into Genesis.
Yep, just trying to get some practice. Now, going back to the D20 for a moment, I will say you introduced me to the D20 system. I mean, you know that I'd never played anything other than Star Wars before you got me into briefly Pathfinder and now clearly permanently D&D, right? There is something about a D20 that's really wonderful. that I don't think you replicate any other way.
No, when you, I mean, the running joke from your Star Wars days was, and I think was it Scott as the game master, or was it the player that opened up a can of,
it was Brian, a can of something or other, or so that otherwise we got to put another explicit label on this recording.
Open up a can of whoop blood on excuse me on it. And so, you know, I think of whenever I see someone roll a 20,
a natty 20,
that's what I think of. So
because
I've also seen you roll, you have a tendency for some reason or another to get on this streak of rolling extraordinarily poorly. I mean, there are gaming sessions where, I mean, and granted, there were some gaming sessions where it was milk on our part, but
okay, in my defense, those were in the early couple sessions we played, and remember, I didn't understand that I had to add all of those mods to a standard roll in D&D.
Yeah, and I didn't either.
Yeah, and so every roll was just like every roll was basically just the natty roll. I had no mods, and so I would you roll to stand up.
That's pretty much
it. That was our first game or two. I'm like, how can I be this bad at a statistically chance thing?
Well, and the game, the session before we paused was the dragon battle.
Yes,
and
that was good.
We had made the adjustments. So you were able to roll correctly, and I think the most interesting part of that was when you started rolling and damaging the dragon. In effect, you could just see her eyes. You're like, ooh, you know.
I was on a high for like a day and a half. I came upstairs, and Amy's like, "How was it?" And I wanted to say to her, like a little kid in school, like, "I just fought a dragon," and I heard it in my head. And it's like, you should not be allowed to talk to people.
Yeah.
But Brad, that was some of the most fun I have ever had role playing. It was just that one interaction. That was incredible.
Yeah. And it was literally me playing as two NPCs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the dragon. So, you know, this idea, this was kind of an open session, but just this idea of blended gaming really can, and I would recommend anyone take a look at this idea. Use whatever platform you want. I mean, as we get into it, you know, I may look up using more Arkenforge or the Kickstarter. We'll have to see what goes on down the road, but just this idea of, to your point, taking notes. Neither of us makes me sound illiterate because I can't talk, but jokes aside, we both have the ability to write. Very narrative backgrounds.
Yes.
And so we do, I think, a good job of, to use a prior episode term, world building.
Yes.
You did a fantastic job of world building this environment we're in, and you've only given me a small snippet of it.
Yeah.
But you've given me enough to really be to really immerse myself into the game.
That's the goal. Yep.
And that's, I think, the goal for folks is that you know, if nothing beats sitting there and playing in front of each other. Don't get me wrong, but if you can blend it, and you've, like you just said, you've put your notes into one location, you can document updates to live sessions. I just don't see there being any reason. And for me, you know, using like Monster Manual or online or Jeff's books, or other books out there, you know, being able to post a picture or show a visual of what the you know, like the dragon. I sent you all a picture of the dragon.
Yeah, right.
So you could see it. It doesn't beat the height, seeing the height of the dragon against your character.
No, but still. And I think you and I really do enjoy theater of the mind play.
Yeah.
Right. But I think you're also right that sometimes just having the visual, even at the end of a session or just dropped in the middle, is so useful. Like I've had a JPEG on my desktop. Actually, it's in a folder. But I've got in Dropbox, but I've got a JPEG that I've been holding on to for a couple weeks at least for you for the next step of this adventure, which will be easy to get to. But because it was something I saw and I thought that's perfect. It was totally unrelated to RPGs, but I thought that's a phenomenon that if you see it, it's going to be like, oh, this really helps to sell the imagery of the place you're going to be going in the game. Yep.
Yeah. And again, I think this idea of us being able to continue to play, assuming I can get my caboose and gear, I overstate it, but point being, we should all look at any potential medium possible, and it doesn't always have to be immediately live, although there's
well, go back to what you actually I think inadvertently, maybe predicted is the wrong word, but your early actions presaged this. So specifically, when we were getting set up for our D&D game, so this was about a year ago.
Yeah.
About a year ago. You were like, okay, I'll DM if you want to play, and I'm like, absolutely, I'm in. And so you've talked about on the podcast before, you really have gone in to the world building and the writing and the thematic ideas of your world, and it shows with every session. But early on, as you were doing this, you know what I'm going to say, you would just occasionally text me.
Yep.
Just out of the blue, you would, like, I could tell when you had some free time, and this was in a previous position when you were really swamped, and so you didn't have much mental bandwidth extra at the time. But I knew when you did, because there'd be a burst of like 2 or 3 nights over 4 or 5, I get these evening texts, and they'd be for the game, and it was just like these anywhere from 2 sentences to a screen full, and it always left me wanting more. But that was just texting, that was just messaging, and over a couple of weeks or a few weeks, you already built this world in my mind. And I mean, that's that multi-platform gaming you're talking about.
Well, I think I even used a voice changing app on my phone and recorded 2 or 3 little brief phrases that would become important in the game, and used a voice changer, saved them as sound files, and sent them to you over text, almost like voice to text type of, or text to voice.
Right.
So I think this idea, and you brought up a great point, you can use even the medium beyond what we originally talked about.
Oh yeah, of course.
Texting, little voice messages, things like that, to like when you wrote out what you wrote out at the Facebook. It got me thinking how I need to define the Nighthawk better. And you got some background. We don't need to discuss that here, but you used that because you said that my character got up from his mat on the floor. And it's because that ship was acquired through not only a card game, but a drinking game, where he was able to sneak off and steal a ship.
And you had told me just like not even that much. So I knew there was, which is why I said right in the intro, right? And your desire to lay low. And so like Brad hasn't really told me anything much about his character or his ship, but I knew there was that piece of backstory. And I also know you had told me early on in the process that you want a game, you want to play with an Edge of the Empire vibe, but you also want to get into the Force, not Jedi, but you want to get into the Force, right?
Yeah, I think based off of whether you liked the sequel trilogy or not, I think there's this idea that the interaction of the Force, or people's interaction with the Force, will change now. And you see that a little bit in The Mandalorian with Grogu. You see it we'll have to see more of what happens with Rosario Dawson playing
Ahsoka.
Oh
yeah,
with her white sabers, which I just think are awesome. The Gray Jedi. We've talked about this. So just introducing that as I think I mentioned, as a backstory. My character doesn't have to be at the forefront, because that's the challenge with gaming too. We've talked about. Do you want to role play, using a Star Trek metaphor? Do you want to role play Captain Kirk,
right?
Or do you want to role play, someone who would be a background character on Lower Decks?
And I think that's exactly right. I think, and you and I have talked about this offline, but I think when you're a kid or when you're younger, of course you want to be a Kirk in your adventure. But at this stage in our lives, knowing what we know with the experiences we've had in real life, there is certainly for me, there is an attraction to true freedom. Right. Like if you want to play, like this is just my limitation, but I've never felt comfortable playing major characters or around major characters in a canon, because if the canon is still alive, I don't want my game to be de facto invalidated.
Yeah.
Right. And so I want to have the freedom to do whatever. And so our game, Droids and Destiny, is at a time and in a location where we can draw from everything, but we will make sure we fit between the lines of canon so that we won't go too far off the rails.
You can have life-changing stories for your character that are dynamic and big and are not even a blip within the galaxy.
It's a big galaxy.
The same thing. Just like we're gonna, Star Trek Prodigy.
Very curious. In fact, I'm glad you said that, because as this episode drops, Prodigy will have just come out.
See?
So we'll be getting there, guys. We'll be getting there.
So what ultimately is going to be, as a character, again, we're a little all over the place, but this goes to what we're talking about with world building. And I'm holding up my book because I keep it on my desk.
The Edge of the Empire. Yeah.
Edge of the Empire.
It's a beautiful thing.
You can create an environment, play synchronous, asynchronous, and you can do this world building and create an immersive environment where there is canon, Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yes.
And you don't necessarily have to do this as much with D&D, I don't think. Although there is air quote canon with multiple within the planes and so on. But with Star Trek and Star Wars, you can create immersive environments that really catch people's attention and really gets the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, with any game. Yeah.
But won't affect.
Right.
We're not going to destroy the Enterprise. We're not going to, kill off Luke as he leaves in the X-Wing with Grogu. It's just, that's not how we're playing. But we can use the canon to create something interesting for the characters.
So that's a perfect segue in a moment to walk over to the GM corner, because as we're recording this tonight, there's been all kinds of news in the past few days that's been catching our attention. But first, pause. I want you to roll your perception one more time.
Okay. Now I
Still
have to
against
get my
the
dice
two
out
purple
again.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow, green. So 2 purple, green, and yellow, right?
Yep. Your perception against an easy difficulty, or excuse me, an average difficulty.
Average difficulty of 2.
You got it.
So 2 disadvantage, 2 threat.
At your fingers.
Yeah.
So a bunch of advantage. You know what? I'm gonna say, go ahead and throw. Okay, go ahead and throw a purple die in there too, because at this point you're gonna give you an experience boost.
Another purple?
I'm sorry, I meant to say blue. Throw in a blue. Just add that to your roll. Okay, we're gonna call it. So what's your total there?
So 1. So was it
So do the successes and threats first.
So successes, I have.
I think it was 1 and 1.
Yep.
Success is the explosion.
Yep. Oh wait. Successes is the explosion.
And the threat is the triangle, if you will.
Yeah.
I think of them as the Cylons, but yeah.
Yeah. I have 4.
For what?
4 threat, I think.
I don't. No. Your
triangles are 2. I don't have explosions. I have 2.
Bunch of threats. Okay.
Yeah. I have, and then 4.
And then you got a bunch of advantages.
Yeah. So I have 4, 2 threat, 2. What did you just say?
And okay. So your character eventually wanders back from the cockpit after staring out at the starry expanse, wondering what he's going to do. Picks up the data pad, keeps scrolling. Still can't find anything. It's getting frustrated. Puts the data pad down, and then it starts to the comm system of the ship starts to alert again. A new job has just come in. They are looking for a specific set of requirements for both the ship and the captain's credentials, the types of jobs you've run before along the rim, and we should specify for our listeners the inner western rim of Hutt space.
Mm-hmm.
You figure, what the heck? It can't hurt. You're just scrolling and you've got nothing to do. You submit your reply. You underbid the job. And a moment or two passes. You go back. You go back to the mess to get yourself a sandwich. Right? You've always had a fondness for Nerf on Rye. And the comm system, bloop, 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 which surprises you. It's only been maybe 7-8 minutes. You go back to the data pad, and there's an agreement waiting to be signed by you. What do you want to do?
I want to make sure that the agreement, that the job hasn't changed. So I want to do a perception check to make sure that what I'm signing for is the job, still the job that I had.
Smart. Roll it against 1 purple.
1 purple. Hold on. I want to make sure I read these now, because I want to read them correctly. And I'm not getting fast enough. So
hard to tell. You got a little bit of a bad feeling about it, but you can't tell that anything's off.
Yeah, you know what? I underbid it. Hopefully it'll keep me running. I'm just sitting here otherwise. I don't even know where my droid is right now. Roaming somewhere on the ship. I still don't know this ship very well.
Yeah.
Because I made off with it in a somewhat speedy manner. I'm still trying to figure out what is on the ship. Mm-hmm. I do know that it is a prototype Corellian freighter. It is a freighter that never went into production. So I'm also ready to test it. So I'm going to sign.
Awesome. You scroll through the boilerplate. It's not a lot. It's a job on the rim, so it's not a lot of boilerplate. No one out here is really concerned with legality. They're concerned with obligation, not legality. Yeah. And there are very long memories in this part of the galaxy. That said, there's not a great deal about the job itself, other than even bidding low. It's guaranteeing a payout of 2,000 credits on completion. And the job is fairly vague. It's a multi-stage job. You have to go to a planet called Sebastopol. On Sebastopol, you meet with a contact who will be revealed after you sign. And this contact will then bring you to the actual individual who needs something transported. It seems to be all on the up and up. You sign, it certifies it. And yeah, that's my high-tech Star Wars sound, right? It's a data pad. It's got to have
Hey, it
something.
worked. It worked.
It was convincing to you. That's all we care about.
Yep.
So you plot a course to Sebastopol, which is along the rim. You haven't been there before, but it's not by any means an unknown world. I'm never going to ask you to roll for astrogation along the rim unless there were something interesting or weird about it, because these are all known worlds.
Okay.
So with that, your ship jumps into hyperdrive. The stars and the matrichords queue, and you're off. And we can walk over to the GM corner.
Oh, and that reminds me, I need to get caught up on. So GM corner, I just because of
as he plays with his dice.
Yeah, I'm playing with my dice because I like to count them and make sure I have a number of sets of these. So once I pick a set, I need to play that set through to completion. I don't like it's a little bit of a, because when you buy the starter kits for Star Wars, it comes with a set.
Yep.
So I have a couple sets, but once I start one, I want to use that same set through the end.
Nice.
So for me, in all honesty, you and I have talked about it. I won't give anything away, but I have been going through Jeff's book of non-player characters.
Yep.
And there we go. I found it interesting. There is a random table of cities and towns book by Dr. Tim Woods. And I've been fascinated with this idea of using tools in effect for world building. And going back to my backstory, without changing air quotes, since we were talking about air quote canon of the story, fleshing out some of the new stuff.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as we talk with people, as we interview people, as we see commentary out there, because of some of the stuff that I put out on Instagram, we're getting a lot more followers. Am I doing magic?
You're making dice noises.
Oh, am I? Oh, sorry.
They're soothing.
I love the dice. I love the dice. It's like one of those spinner things the kids used to have when they were younger, it to me, there are so many more tools out there that I have to be cautious, but I've been looking through those, and I even on my desk here, I have my D&D stuff.
Yep.
And then I brought over, as you saw, my Edge of the Empire, and I have Edge of the Empire, and I have Genesis under it. I'm not allowing myself to look at the Genesis book until we're into Droids of Destiny a little further.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the Edge Studio announcements caught my attention and just made me kind of drool for some of the material I already had, and to read a little further into it. So
yeah, that's actually, Brad, that's what I was going to bring to the GM corner too. Just the fact that Edge Studio seems to be up and running, that they've got a really nice, kind of a beautiful looking website, that they are offering. If you go through there a bit, I did it mostly on the phone, but I think I'm going to go through tonight a bit more. There are a bunch of resources, PDFs available for all of their games. But like you said, Brad, what really has caught my attention is that Edge Studio posted a list of their Star Wars properties that they are reprinting.
Yes.
And we posted this to the Dice and Mind Facebook group, but it bears repeating. It's all three of the core rule books for Star Wars. I believe it's the Force Awakens supplement. And then it looks like for each of the three lines of the game, just the two or maybe three most popular adventures, but then also they're reprinting some of the more popular supplemental source books. None of that. I have no interest in buying any of those. I have the books I want, but the fact that they are reprinting is a very good sign, and the fact that right, Sam Stewart said, they will be releasing new content in the future. Now, that could be 2 years away, We don't know. That could be 3 years away. We just don't know. It might not be even that much, but it's still very positive.
It's okay. I mean, from a D&D perspective, you get what, one book, one real book a quarter or something like that, like.
Yeah, they've been hopping lately.
Yeah, they've been hopping lately,
Yeah.
but they don't overwhelm you
No.
like the olden days where, especially with 3.5, where there were just infinite number of books.
Yeah.
You can play, to be honest with you folks, you could play D&D very easily with just the player's handbook.
Oh, yeah.
$22 book, and you're in to play. And they don't overwhelm you with materials like others do. And not to knock it, it's just, I don't want to, the jokes aside, as I collect, but I like to use them as resources. The only ones I really are collecting right now are the Modiphius ones. The Shackleton Expanse book just came out.
Star Trek, yeah.
Yes.
Because they're beautiful books.
Yes. Yeah. And the Shackleton Expanse book just came out, and I have that on order. As what we expected.
That's what we expected. That's a really clever idea. It's funny you bring that up, because then I'll close with this. I'm still really looking forward to the Modiphius Star Trek GM guide.
Oh yeah.
I'm just, which is supposed to come out this winter, like December-ish. I'm just curious. I'm curious to see what they'll do. Kind of goes back to what we talked about in episode 21 last week, that if we look at the GM as showrunner, some of these guides lend themselves more readily to that mentality than others. And my suspicion is that one will do so. Yeah. And I'm always on the lookout for a really good GM guide, to be honest.
Well, those are always interesting to read. And I find the idea of reading that material to me from a GM perspective, I think is even good as a player.
Yeah.
So even if you're a player, if you get into playing, you have a starter kit or whatever the case is, get the player's book. That's enough to play. But if you're looking for some supplemental material between those two books, you could find monsters online. There's lots of different places to find things. Those are the tomes, breaking up you and I think are both in the same mind. Break up the player material, break up the GM material.
Yeah.
It makes it a little easier to read. And I will say, as we start, before we wrap up here, today was free RPG day, wasn't it?
Today was free RPG day.
As we record this, that gives it away. It's the 16th of October.
Yeah.
So hopefully you got out to your local game store and checked out what was available. I know there were a lot of games going on at different places here in the city. So, but yeah, between that and I mean, we've got the podcast and Star Wars and Trekport and D&D. We don't have enough time for everything we want to do.
Oh, no. Oh my God. Not even close. No. All right. We could keep going, but you already know that. So we're going to stop and save you all the hassle of asking us to do so. Thanks as always for listening. Be well, stay in touch. Much, much more to come in the next several episodes. Bye-bye.